على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم رسوله النبي الأمين المكين الحنين الكريم الرؤوف الرحيم. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما تحب وترضى بأن تصلي عليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حتى إذا فتحت يأجوج ومأجوج وهم من كل حدب ينسلون. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Most respected ulama, my respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The Palestine Information Network, which is a London-based NGO dedicated to the liberation of Al-Aqsa, started off an initiative and a campaign about a year or two ago, wherein closest to what is historically celebrated as Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, which is traditionally and historically celebrated and observed in Al-Aqsa itself on the 27th of Rajab. They declared that week as Al-Aqsa week, and they embarked on a global campaign to conscientize the Muslim Ummah with the hashtag in terms of digital platform. Apologies. With the hashtag in terms of a hashtag being Love Al-Aqsa, to conscientize the Ummah about the spiritual, historical, and the cultural importance and the political importance of Al-Aqsa itself. And as such, masajid and institutions throughout the world are involved in a campaign currently to conscientize the Ummah about Al-Aqsa. And because we are part of the parcel of the Ummah, obviously we have to also give and participate in these international programs, because we are a global Ummah. We become a global Ummah far earlier than what we know today as the globalized village, the global village. And it is critical for us to be in a condition where we are actively involved in international affairs. We can discuss Ukraine at some other time and discuss what we could call war games between America and Russia, murdering each other's, posturing, so to speak, at some other time. Let's dedicate this week here, inshallah, to what I call the Al-Aqsa Axis. Axis doesn't only mean a central point or a central line upon which things revolve, which also Al-Aqsa is currently politically and spiritually and historically, but also means an alliance. So let's go back into history. In the first recorded sitting of the General Assembly of the United Nations, 1400 years ago, a sitting of all the Prophets representing every single nation. Like the Prophet stated, every Ummah has a large number, or one Nabi will have one follower behind him on the day of Qiyamah. So there was a general sitting and a special sitting of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I'm just not using these terms because these are Quranic terms. Quran speaks about the fact in Surah Al-Baqarah, كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Mankind were all a single unit and a single nation. And what is hidden in that day is that they differ. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His divinely appointed representatives as bringers of glad tidings and as warners to bring them back to what we would call at the very least spiritual unity, united under the banner of Tawheed. So when I speak about the General Assembly of the United Nations, I'm talking about literally as the Quran has spoken. Those representatives that are there in that special session of the United Nations are the representatives of every single nation in history on planet Earth till the day of Qiyamah. From millions of followers to a single follower. But this conference and this special session of the General Assembly is a unique one. On one hand, it is fundamentally about the coronation of the Holy Prophet ﷺ as Khatamul Anbiya. Secondly, it is a conference of all Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, who are the stakeholders in the history of humanity and who played a critical role in the history of humanity and going forth till the day of Qiyamah. And what is interesting also is that this General Assembly of this United Nations is being held firstly under the auspices of the Secretary General of the United States, of the United Nations. And that is the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Yeah. So I think those things, you'll be surprised how disconcerting they become, because you're paying attention to that, you don't even remember what you're talking about. Okay? So the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, his coronation is taking place. He is brought in, and a special convoy is sent to usher him into the United Nations Assembly. And remember, the United Nations Assembly is not in New York. The United Nations headquarters is not in New York. It is in Jerusalem. And the United Nations Assembly building is Al-Aqsa. Although it is in basic state of disrepair after the destruction, right? You know, in terms of the Second Temple and whatever it is, after the destruction, but the General Assembly still takes place, very much like our, you know, our parliament over here. But anyway, the Holy Prophet ﷺ is inaugurated. The session starts off and commences with Salah. And it is led by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and all 124,000 plus or minus Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam perform the Salah behind him, and they accept him and acknowledge him as their Imam. After the Salah is over, right, where Jibreel, the Archangel, had given the Adhan and the Iqamah, and by the way, participating in the Salah on planet Earth were the angels of the heavens as well. After the Salah comes to an end, now the conference begins. The conference is addressed, and the General Assembly of the United Nations is addressed fundamentally by 5 Anbiya, by 5 prophets of Allah. One is the patriarch of the 3 Abrahamic faiths, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, who is the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as it is known today. Fundamentally is Islam. Okay? And he gives the first address. I don't want to go into detail because time won't permit me to do so. The second address is, now let me give you the information first. In terms of the 5 people who address the General Assembly of the United Nations, all 5 speakers are major stakeholders, right? Past, present, and future, in terms of the future of Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem. If the Holy Prophet ﷺ's coronation ceremony was the fundamental idea behind this special session of the Assembly of the United Nations, the general theme for the conference is the future of Al-Aqsa. That's the general theme of the conference. So the Al-Aqsa issue is not something that we just started discussing today, and it's an initiative by the Palestinian Information Network or whatever it is there. The future of Al-Aqsa was the fundamental discussion that took place in the conference of the General Assembly of the United Nations of Anbiya. Ibrahim alayhi speaks first as the patriarch. Thereafter, Musa alayhi addresses the people. Thereafter, Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam and Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam address the people, address the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Then Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And finally, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, if you look at the prophets chosen to give a khutbah and to address the General Assembly of Anbiya alayhi salatu in the United Nations, Ibrahim alayhi salam is the patriarch of all the 3 Abrahamic faiths, number 1. Number 2, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is key to this entire thing, because the Bani Israel were the ones, Bani Israel, not the Yahud, not the Zionists, the Bani Israel were promised the promised land. And we know the history in terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granting them freedom from the tyranny of Fir'aun and parting the sea and granting them free passage and promising them what we know as the promised land. Obviously, the Bani Israel, in terms of their nature, they couldn't agree on anything. They wanted their own little, watering holes as well. Nothing has changed, right? They couldn't agree on anything. Finally, when they come to the, so to speak, as close to Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem as possible, they say, "Idhab anta wa rabbuk faqatila inna hahuna qaidun." They told Musa alayhi salam, "You and your Lord go, right? And you go and fight, and you go and free Jerusalem for us first, and we will be sitting here. We'll wait." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevented them from entering into Al-Ardul Muqaddasa, which was the dream of Musa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam. And Musa alayhi salatu wasalam breathed his final breaths and is eternally buried right, very close to Jerusalem. When the Holy Prophet ﷺ described it in Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, he said it's close by, it's on the edge of a sand dune, with red hillocks there. If I were to take you there, I'll even identify the tomb of Musa alayhi salam for you. That's how close it is to Jerusalem. It's practically, you know what, it's like on the outskirts of Jerusalem itself. Okay, Musa alayhi salam. Then comes the discussion by Dawood alayhi salatu salam. Why Dawood alayhi salatu salam? Because in order to give liberation to Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa, the first person that played a key role in this was Jalut, Goliath, right? And prior to him, right, was Talut, Saul. Now, Saul was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the Nabi who was the prophet of the Bani Israel at that time, Shamuel alayhi salam, or Samuel, to take on the oppression of Jalut or Goliath. And Talut was the king, Saul became the king as appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Dawood alayhi salam was part of the army. And Dawood alayhi salatu salam was the hero of that battle for the liberation of Al-Aqsa. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَعَطَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah then granted him the kingdom to rule over what we know today, Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa. Next speaker is Sulaiman ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu, who is the son of Dawood alayhi salatu, and who built and rebuilt Al-Aqsa. Adam alayhi salam is the original builder. 40 years after Makkatul Mukarramah, who builds Al-Aqsa to its glory as you and I know it, right? Or the temple on Temple Mount, Sulaiman alayhi salam. The original Al-Aqsa built by Sulaiman alayhi salam does not exist. Please, it does not exist. Right? The remnants may be found there, but original Al-Aqsa built with Haykal-e-Sulaimani and this and that there doesn't exist. It was destroyed. It was rebuilt. And all the Anbiya that came subsequently to Sulaiman alayhi salam, all of them engaged in ibadah in the rebuilt temple, as they would call it, on Temple Mount. Okay? I've given this history previously, so I don't want to go into details in that. After Sulaiman alayhi salam discusses the matter, Isa alayhi salam then gives a khutbah. And Isa alayhi salam is crucial. After Isa alayhi salam speaks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's favors upon him, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam then delivers what I would call the main address, the chief address. And the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi alladhi arsalani rahmatan lil alameen wa kaffatan lin nasi bashiran wa nadhira. You know, this khutbah in itself is brilliant. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam speaks about and addresses his cosmic significance, and he mentions his international significance in terms of planet Earth. And he said, I have been sent as a cosmic prophet, as rahmatul lil alameen, as a mercy unto the worlds, beyond the observable universe as well. And in the second line, he said, وَكَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا, and have been sent to all of humanity. Unlike every other Nabi who was sent to a group of people and to a nation, I am the chief of the United Nations, because I am an international prophet. Every human being till the day of Qiyamah will be under my banner, and I am his prophet, so I am a universal prophet. وَكَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا. Then he said, وَأَنزَلَ عَلَيَّ الْقُرْآنَ فِيهِ تِبْيَانٌ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And the book that has been revealed to me is an international book. It's a historical book. It's not going to be made mansukh, and it will not be abrogated by any other divinely revealed book. It's there till the day of Qiyamah. It is the book of guidance till the day of Qiyamah for humanity. He said, وَجَعَلَ أُمَّتِي خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. And my ummah has been made the best of nations to have emerged from humanity. وَجَعَلَ أُمَّتِي وَسَطًا. And my ummah has been made a very balanced ummah. I'm just using the word balance. وَجَعَلَ أُمَّتِي هُمَ الْأَوَّلُونَ وَالْآخِرُونَ. And has made my ummah the first and of the last. وَشَرَحَ لِي صَدْرِي. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has expanded my chest. وَوَضَعَ عَنِّي وِزْرِي. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has removed the burden from my shoulders. وَرَفَعَ لِي ذِكْرِي. And Allah has elevated my mention. وَجَعَلَنِي فَاتِحًا خَاتِمًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made me as the opener and the seal. Right? Fatih also means the one who is victorious. After that, when he made this khutbah, and the Holy Prophet encapsulated everything that Nubuwwah is and who he is. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, فَبِهَذَا فَضَلَكُمْ مُحَمَّدًا. He said, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you superiority over everybody else. Then the Holy Prophet after his critical address, then he takes it to a second level. And the Holy Prophet directs the conversation to the general theme of this assembly of the United Nations of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. And what is the general theme? The future of Al-Aqsa. So the words are, this is from Mustadrak Hakim and Bayhaqi. He said, ثُمَّ تَذَاكَرُوا أَمَرَ السَّاعَةِ فَرَدُّوا أَمَرَهُمْ إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. Then the Holy Prophet ﷺ commenced the discussion, right, a panel discussion now, with regards to the signs of the hour. And he said, فَرَدُّوا أَمَرَهُمْ إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. Then Ibrahim alayhi salam was asked to comment on the matter. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, فَقَالَ لَا عِلْمَ لِي بِهَا. He said, I am not well acquainted with the issues of the final hour. Then the hadith says, فَرَدُّوا أَمَرَهُمْ إِلَىٰ مُوسَى عَلَيْهِ salam. Then the matter was tabled to Musa alayhi salam. Can you comment on the matter? Musa alayhi salam said, فَقَالَ لِي لَا عِلْمَ لِي بِهَا. He said, I have no knowledge about it either. Then فَرَدُّوا أَمَرَهُمْ إِلَىٰ عِيسَى عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. Then the matter was tabled before Isa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wassalam. And Isa alayhi salatu wassalam then went on to lead this panel discussion regarding the future of Al-Aqsa. Because of time, I'm going to read it for you in terms of the translation. Isa alayhi salatu wassalam said, as for the time when it shall befall, no one knows it except Allah. Future of Al-Aqsa and the future of the world and the end of times. He said, as for the time when it shall befall, no one knows it except Allah. As for what my Lord has assured me concerning what precedes it, then. So he said, Allah has informed me of what's going to happen prior to the day of Qiyamah. He said, the first, that Dajjal or Antichrist will come forth, and I will face him with 2 rods. Right? The words in the Arabic are very interesting because he said 2 rods. That's the way they translate. I say 2 sabers. I don't mean in lightsabers or people who thought maybe it's like too futuristic for you. Okay? But he said قَضِيبًا وَاللَّطِيفُ مِنَ السُّيُوفِ. A qadib is something which is even thinner and smaller than a normal sword. That's why I said a saber. Right? So Isa alayhi said, I will confront him with 2 swords. It could be something that is laser, Allahu alam, I don't know. He said, I will face him with 2 swords. At my sight, he shall melt like lead. And in one narration, he shall melt like salt in water. Now, where will this be taking place? The final point will be at Lod, or Lud. Right? Lud is literally where the Ben Gurion airport is. Lud, maqam of Lud. Isa alayhi salam, I will confront him and he will literally, what's the word? He said, he will melt like lead. He said, Allah shall cause his destruction as soon as he sees me. It will be said to the very stones will say, oh Muslim, behind me hides a disbeliever. Therefore come and kill him. And Allah shall cause them all to die. So he speaks about the first stage of the war. You know, when Isa alayhi salam will descend to the eastern minaret of Damascus, and when he will come to Al-Aqsa or Jerusalem itself in particular. Right? And this is where this is going to be taking place. And all those markers are there. They tried to change the names in the illegitimate state of Israel, but if you look at it, they still have the maqam of Lod. You go down there, Ben Gurion airport is around the corner, literally, so to speak. So that he'll be trying to flee, and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will come and he will find catching at the point there, and Dajjal will be destroyed. Right? And thereafter, what will happen? Generally, we stop our story right there. Dajjal came, greatest fitna on planet Earth, is going to come to an end there, Isa alayhi salam will destroy. What happens next? That's the first phase of what we would call World War III or whatever the situation may be. With Ukraine right now, we don't know World War III first and then World War IV. Allahu Alam. Right? Isa alayhi salam speaks about the second stage. When Dajjal is destroyed, there will be a period of peace and amnesty. And the Holy Prophet spoke about this era of prosperity. I don't want to go into details about that. Then there will be a second phase. People will then return to their countries and nations. And at that time, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog shall come out. Quran says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Now, I don't want people to misunderstand. Many people, when they give you these interpretations of the final days and the final hours, make it seem as if, you know what, Dajjal will come, he'll be destroyed, then a new nation will arise that will be known as Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and they will come out all of a sudden, and they will issue forth throughout the world. No, it's not like that. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are a nation that have existed historically for thousands of years. You know, like you have the Chinese who've lived for thousands of years, like you have the Aryan nation, the Hindus, the people of India and so on, who've existed for 1,000 years. So they are also a nation. Allah has given them a special name that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have any other name and they don't exist on planet Earth. Likewise, don't ever be under the impression, like many people will tell you, no, Allah has screened them off from us currently with a great war. Sadda. No, it's not. It's that sadda and that wall is actually to keep them out, not to keep them in. Many people make this error that they are hiding behind one wall inside and a small hole is made inside and finally when the wall breaks, right, then they will come and issue forth. No! Actually the wall is to protect the people behind the wall from these people invading them. And this is where the issue of the Caucasus right now in Ukraine becomes a bit interesting. Okay? So Isa alayhi said Ya'juj and Ma'juj will emerge, meaning they will then amass their forces, right, and their armies to attack the army of Islam. Who is the leader of the army of Islam at that time? Isa alayhi salatu. And who will be behind him? Many people who called themselves Christians before. Many people who called themselves Jews before. And many Muslims who called them Muslims before won't be with him. Yeah. So, United Nations once again, we're going to get a new United Nations. Okay? Ya'juj and Ma'juj will emerge. Meaning they will amass an army. They're already here. Right? The Holy Prophet gave one of the signs. He says when the army of Ya'juj passes through Lake Tiberias, as we know, or the Sea of Galilee, they will drink up its water. In 2014, if I remember when I gave this talk, we had spoken about, I think it was the Dajjal or Al-Mahdi, whatever it is there. At that time, technically speaking, the Sea of Galilee, technically and scientifically speaking, had already died out. So where's the army of Ya'juj? Obviously they're here. We haven't identified them correctly. Okay? But the Sea of Galilee has already reached the point now where it is virtually or technically empty and is done. By the time the Ma'juj come in, the next superpower comes in, right? They will say, no, there was never ever water over here. So there's still time, because until the water dries up completely, we still got some time in terms of, we still stuck with Ya'juj. Ma'juj haven't come yet. God help us. Okay? Then they will come. Isa alayhi salam says that they will come from every direction. They will tramp all nations underfoot. Do you know what that means? They will have an army that will attack all of the world. And they will vanquish everybody. And they will be victorious. He said, whatever they come upon, they will destroy. They will drink up every body of water. At last, the people will come to me complaining about them. And then he said, at that time I will invoke Allah against them, so that He will destroy them and cause their death until the whole world will reek of their stench. Right? And I asked some scientists about this. You know, when you talk about nuclear war literally is going to take place. And the Holy Prophet in one of the hadiths said it will start off here. And if you look at nuclear radiation and so on, from what doctors have said, this is where the effects of nuclear radiation begin to manifest. And Isa alayhi salam speaks about this here, that this nation that would have trampled the whole world war, destroyed, right, will eventually be vanquished by the dua of Isa alayhi salam and the army of Isa alayhi salam, which by the way will be a very small army comparatively. These guys will have a massive army. But Allah will destroy them, and they will be destroyed to such a point inside there, as far as a bird will fly, as far as you can see, and it will die of exhaustion before it reaches the end of the dead bodies, which tells you millions are going to be losing their lives. You know, many people, and I must mention this because sometimes I just laugh at this, many people are very excited about the fact, oh, we can't wait for the Mahdi to come, we can't wait for Isa alayhi salam to come. No, we can't. Yeah, great, it's great to make dua about that. But do you know what the consequences are? Have you any idea of the consequences? Do you know what you're talking about? You're talking about mass destruction. Currently, the nuclear weapons that the world possesses is enough to destroy planet Earth in under 2 hours, sir. Under 2 hours. None of us will be around. We're all gone. That's currently the nuclear firepower that the world possesses. Under 2 hours, planet Earth, as you and I, you just have the buildings left over. That's it. You've seen Chernobyl. You've seen nothing doing. You've seen Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Imagine on a global scale. So there's nothing to be excited about. Really. Okay? Then Isa alayhi salatu salam said to them, he said, and they'll carry their bodies and hurl them into the sea. Isa alayhi salam then went on with his khutbah. He said, I have been assured by my Lord that once all this takes place, then the hour will be as the pregnant mother at the last stages of her pregnancy. That's the final end. That's the end of the world. And then he said after, her family does not know when she shall suddenly give birth, by day or by night. Meaning that's how it is. She's already in labor. What does this happen there? The world is coming to an end. That's it. This is a sobering reality. In the first International Assembly of the United Nations, this was one of the most critical addresses in terms of the past, present and future of humanity, delivered by Isa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wassalam. And all of this is going to commence and will take place and begin in Al-Aqsa and the precincts of Jerusalem and finally end there as well. With Mahshar, the day of resurrection and the day of gathering, also taking place and central to Al-Aqsa. It will commence, so to speak, from Arafah, right? And Yawm al-Ardi al-Mahshari wal-Manshar is Sham. And all of Sham, as you and I know, is not Syria. Sham is not Syria. Sham is Jordan. Sham is what we know as Palestine. Sham is what we know as Syria. All of these form part of what we know as Sham. So what is critical in this Al-Aqsa week that we are celebrating and we are observing internationally, we've got to understand the spiritual, political, right, as well as the historical dimension of Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem itself, and how critically important it is not only to people on a political level or to nations on a political level, but critical to the history of humanity. And mind you, it's not a very happily, and they live happily ever after ending. It's not. It's not. So anybody who's standing out there in the Muslim community invoking World War III or World War IV and invoking the destruction of humanity, understand what you are invoking. And Isa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam wasn't excited about the matter. Because it was such a crucial matter 1400 years ago. This matter was discussed. Right? And under the chairmanship of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Isa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu came there and he established his role in terms of what will happen with the future of humanity. And the critical thing for us is to understand that the coming of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will not only be a momentous occasion for Muslims, but for humanity in general. But what it brings with it is nothing short of frightening. Nothing short of frightening. These aspects of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj are so critical in our modern age for us to understand the context in which you and I are living in right now. Right? Because someone said a very interesting thing today. It says, Russia breaks one rule regarding Ukraine there and everybody wants to go to war, and is the illegitimate state of Israel has broken literally maybe hundreds of international laws and a resolution of the United Nations, and nobody does anything about it. Finally, when someone does anything about it, it's going to be through divine intervention. Through divine intervention. So this was the discussion at the General Assembly of the United Nations of Prophets ﷺ, with plus minus 124,000 prophets in Al-Aqsa, in Jerusalem, on the night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. And its significance is something that we need to repeat continuously, so the Ummah will be reminded that we have a critical role to play to protect this place, and to be part and parcel of that axis, that alliance, which is the alliance of good, as opposed to the alliance of evil. Right? As much as we speak about the beauty and the supernatural dimension, the cosmic dimension of Isra and Mi'raj, there's a sobering reality to it that we need to be aware of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this ummah the ability to be able to read and to understand the text and the context of the current political climate that you and I are in, and the importance of Al-Aqsa and the importance of the Muslim ummah going forward. Because the reality of the matter is that our response currently is in one form or the other going to influence the future of Al-Aqsa. But the way we respond to it now is what we will be held accountable and responsible for. We may not be alive when all of these incidents take place, but Allah will ask us, did you, in your time, in your period, give your life, give your blood, give your wealth to protect Islam, symbolized by Al-Aqsa? Did you participate in the struggle? You had an opportunity to do so. They say pre-war preparation. Were you part of the pre-war prep? With your wealth, with your blood, with your life? That's the thing. Allah grants to be inshallah. Just two announcements. One is that we will be observing the journey of Isra and Mi'raj and its historical significance on Monday night after Salatul Maghrib. The program will be Yasin Khatam, Naat and lecture, Isha, and then after refreshments inshallah. As always, we have the accommodation for our sisters as well. We are back to a basic degree of normality. You've got to maintain your masking and whatever it is inside there. But please, there's a critical need for us to come back to the masajid. I've seen a degree of apathy which is scary. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us inshallah. And And secondly, just as, if I may use the word, shout out, we have too many humanitarian organizations in here today. Just like to welcome them as well. Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman here, we have Dr. Zainul Kaji of Aqsa, South Africa, and we have the all engaged human aid. That was another, Allah bless all of them, inshallah, Allah grant them success in all their efforts, inshallah ta'ala, and make this global challenge that we are facing right now, right? Allah make it easy for all of us, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه